Good evening, and welcome to our monthly study of Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. We'll start with a chant. I think it's too loud. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. So, we are back in New York City in 1896. It is Friday, January 10th in the morning, and Swami Vivekananda is at his lodgings at 228 West 39th Street, a brownstone building, and it's one of those long, thin rooms, narrow buildings, but they go back quite a ways, and so there's two rooms, which with a kind of connecting archway or something probably between them, and so it makes one long parlor for these classes, and the room is packed with people, probably well over 100 people packed into the room and listening to Swami Vivekananda as he's teaching his fourth and final class for advanced students. The temperature is below freezing outside. The cast iron pipes are clanking now and then as the boiler goes on down in the basement, and now and then you hear the sound of horse-drawn carriages on the cobblestone streets outside. But people aren't listening to that, they're listening to Swami Vivekananda. And of course we've been going through this class, which is the fourth class for advanced students. He actually would give the fourth class for beginner students that evening, the Friday evening, which would be the very last class on Karma Yoga. But he's here. We're in the middle of this class, and during our last study, we found that he waxed so poetic and so beautiful about doing everything simply as worship, as a sacrifice unto the Lord. And it's really moving passages. Be at peace, perfect peace with yourself, and give up your whole body and mind and everything unto Him. Eternal sacrifice. In old times, the sacrifice was pouring oblations into the fire. Make that one great sacrifice day and night. When you are passing through the streets, let the mind make the sacrifice. In search of wealth in this world, thou art the only wealth I have found. I sacrifice myself unto thee. In search of someone to be loved, thou art the only one beloved I have found. I sacrifice myself unto thee. Repeat that day and night. So that's what Swami Vivekananda himself used to do, and what he asks us to do is take that spiritual ideal, that idea, hold on to it, remind ourselves of it again and again. He says, say that day and night until it becomes a habit, until it gets into the blood, the nerves, the brain, and the whole body is every moment saying it. Then go out anywhere, nothing will touch you. Go into the midst of the battlefield with roaring cannon and the din of war, and you will be free and at peace. Let shots fly around your head. I sacrifice myself to thee. All right, so this was the last. This is almost like it would be a beautiful closing to the class. But then Swamiji completely shifts gears. And he goes back to the idea of duty. And this may be a little confusing because in the earlier, he addresses duty quite a bit in a number of the earlier classes. Those of you who have been following all along or have studied the Karma Yoga deeply, you'll remember that there's a whole class dedicated to the topic, what is duty? In the second class for beginners, which was December 20, 1895. What is duty? And he also dealt at length with duty in his first class for advanced students. Each is great in his own place. And there we find that he suggests that the Karma Yoga is doing your duty unattached. The work that comes to us of its own, according to our place in society, according to our karma, as it were, do that, but unattached. Do it, if we can, with love. Do it as worship. But just do our duty. And he notes that the very idea of duty is so relative. What's duty in one culture and time and in history and for one people in one stage of life is antithetical and to duty for someone else. Like the duty of a soldier is to kill the enemies when necessary, to defend the country, and if necessary to kill the others. Whereas the duty of a monk could never be to kill. So that kind of difference. The duty of a doctor is never to kill, but rather to heal. So that's how duty depends on our station in life, and etc. And so he deals quite at length with that. In fact, it may be useful to just have a little look at some of the things he says, because now in this last class he's going to say, give up this idea of duty. It's the midday sun scorching the very ourself, burning. We're burning in the misery of this idea of duty. So, so he suggests in this earlier class, what is duty? Any action that makes us go upward and Godward is a good action. Any action that makes us go downward is an evil action. It is our duty to do things which make us go upward, Godward. It is against our duty to do things which make us go downward towards the brutes. So this is pretty straightforward. It seems helpful. So how is Swami Vivekananda then now rejecting the idea of duty? Let's read a little more what he says. There's only one idea which is universal for all humankind, and the duty of all humanity, of any age or sect and country, and that has been summed up in the Sanskrit aphorism, do not injure any being. Non-injuring any being is virtue, injuring any being is vice. This is the only objective, universal duty we can find. And yet, even there, as we saw for Arjuna, what was Arjuna's duty on the battlefield? So he suggests doing in the best way that duty which is ours at a certain time is the best thing we can do in this world. Do that duty which is yours. And we should not judge someone by the nature of their duties, but by the manner in which they do them. So that's another beautiful thing. One's manner of doing one's duties and the power to do them is the test of a person, not the nature of the duty. The shoemaker who can turn out a strong, nice pair of shoes in the shortest time is a better person, according to his works, than the professor who talks nonsense every day of his life. So this is some of the ideas we have of duty in earlier classes that Swamiji was giving. So now let's see what he says in this last class for advanced students. Karma Yoga teaches us duty on the lower plane. Each one of us must do his duty. This is my duty, and that is my duty. Yet, we see that this duty is the one great cause of misery. It seems confusing, doesn't it? He is talking from a higher plane, from the highest plane, from that plane where there is actually nothing, where we are no longer the doer, where that idea that I am the doer is it stems from ignorance, is a delusion. Actually, God is the doer. Or, from another standpoint, it's the gunas which do everything, and I am the witness who stands unattached. So remember, this class has been titled Freedom. So it starts to, it kind of swings between the highest levels of devotion, where we hold our lives our lives and ourselves and everything as a sacrifice, and on the other hand, this idea of I am the self, unattached, the witness of everything that's unfolding. So he's going to talk at some length about how duty makes us miserable. I think it my duty to help a brother or to help a son, and then the son grows up and becomes a blackguard, and I still think it my duty to help him. Swamiji liked that word blackguard. He uses it from time to time. I think in those days it must have been a somewhat common term for a wicked person. It becomes so I still think it my duty to help him. It becomes a disease with me, drags me forever forward. It clutches hold of me and makes my whole life miserable. It is my duty to be patriotic, and so to go on cutting our neighbors' throats. It is the duty of the master to tyrannize over the servant, and of the servant to cheat the master, and so on, duty everywhere. This is the bane of human life. All right, so he's going to now develop this idea that what we call duty mostly is selfishness, and attachment stems from attachment, and mostly it makes us suffer. So on the one hand, in the earlier class for beginners, he's suggesting that do what work falls to you as your duty, and the highest duty is not to injure anyone. The highest duty is that is your duty which takes you towards God. That's one idea of duty, but mostly what people call duty actually is attachment, not actual duty. And it's attachment, and it burns us. And then he quotes from, and perhaps this is significant, he quotes a line from the Ashtavakra Samhita, which is text of taking the position of staunch non-dualism, staunch Advaita. And it's a beautiful text, and has been fairly recently repopularized on the internet, especially by our dear Swami Vivekananda, who started teaching from Ashtavakra Samhita even when he was here. And it's one of our big sellers now because of his classes on Ashtavakra and retreats. And Sri Ramakrishna knew the text, and he asked Swami Vivekananda to read from it to him. But he wouldn't let anyone else read from it. It's an amazing text, and we'll quote. Swamiji next says, this duty, this idea of duty, is this midday summer sun which scorches the innermost soul of humankind. All right, this is actually from chapter 18, verse number 3. And the verse says, Kartavya dukkha martanda jwala dagdham taratmanah kutah prashama piyusha dhara saramrite sukham. So he's quoting the first half actually. Kartavya, that which is what we say duty, that which ought to be done. Duty is the dukkha, the misery of the burning sun, jwala dagdha, which is scorching, burning the innermost self, the antaratma. And then the second half of the verse says, well, actually, the translation as given by Swami Nityaswarupananda in the usual text we use is, how can one whose heart's core has been scorched by the heat of the sun of sorrow arising from duty enjoy happiness without the continuous shower of the ambrosia of tranquility? There's a nice commentary by Swami Nityaswarupananda. Let me read it. Duty, as it is ordinarily understood, is nothing but slavery in the form of virtue. It is the morbid attachment of flesh for flesh, the absurd greed for gold and gain or other worldly things to which we feel attached. Only those who consider the world real find that they have things to do, duties to fulfill. The sense of duty, therefore, arises ultimately from ignorance. And it binds us to the relative life, subjecting us to all the miseries of the world. This scorches our innermost soul. So then the second part of the verse describes this beautiful image of this tranquility which showers down like a waterfall of nectar.
Is duty, is that the word dharma in Sanskrit, or are they saying dharma?
Yeah, it's a good question. Dharma, and of course, dharma is a term which is applied to so many different things. Perhaps you're thinking especially of this term swadharma, one's calling, or one's caught, because the term dharma comes from the root dhri, to uphold, that which upholds. So one's dharma, the dharma of water is wetness, and the dharma of human beings, we can say ultimately, is what is is divinity, is to realize our own divinity. But there's that famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3. Sri Krishna says, do one's own dharma, though imperfectly. The dharma of another is filled with fear. So that's that idea of doing one's own duty. So there, in that case, swadharma could be translated as duty. Let's see how Swami Swarupananda translates it in this edition. I think it's 35. Yes. Shreyan swadharmo viguna. Better is one's own dharma, though imperfect, than the dharma of another well performed. Better is death in one's own dharma. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. So we have a natural, some work seems disagreeable to us, and we don't want to do it, and we want to do something else, but perhaps we're not suited for something else. The shoemaker whom he was talking about, his dharma is making shoes. That's his natural ability is there, and if he wants to become a jeweler, he doesn't have the skills. It's not his calling. And similarly, the jeweler who would want to make shoes, she won't be able to make shoes well. So
is the duty that's scorching, is that dharma that's scorching?
Well, I think this is from actually speaking from a different level altogether. And here the idea of duty is, well, I have to do that. I'm caught by my duty. I'm drawn. I have to serve my family, and I have to earn money, and it's my duty to earn money, and it's that kind of. This commentary is very nice. Let's listen closely. He says, only those who consider the world real, means this world is ultimately real, and this is where I am going to live and attain peace and extract my few drops of peace and happiness. Only those who consider the world real find that they have things to do or duties to fulfill. So you can see how he's shifted the whole narrative to a higher level from the standpoint of the infinite. What duty do we have? It's just dragging us through life after life, this idea of duty, and it stems from attachment. The sense of duty, therefore, arises ultimately from ignorance, identifying ourselves with our bodies. But we, as Swami Vivekananda often says, we go from lower truth to higher truth. And or Swami Brahmananda would say, you can't, if you throw someone, if someone wants to get up on the roof, if you just launch them up there with a catapult or something, they'll be seriously injured. You have to go step by step, gradually up to the roof. So that's perhaps why Sri Ramakrishna didn't permit most of his disciples to study this kind of non-dual text. He didn't feel they were ready for it. So this binding us, by the innermost soul, see, that's why this idea of the innermost soul, the antaratma, gets scorched. Why? Because the very nature of the self is freedom, is infinite freedom. And yet here we are caught in a body and drawn to do all these things, which we're calling our duties. Let's read a little further, see if we get a little more insight into what Swamiji means by why he's now describing this duty as bringing misery. Look at those pure slaves to duty. Duty is going on, thinking all the time of what we have to do. No time to think of anything else. No time to say prayers. Never time to wash themselves or bathe. Swamiji would often poke fun at Westerners because the bathing habit is very strong in India, at least once a day, but very often twice or even thrice. And he found Westerners were not so regular in their bathing habits. He would poke fun at them sometimes. So here also he's mentioning that. So duty is, what is duty? It's going on thinking all the time of what we have to do, what the ordinary idea of duty. And I guess he must have seen this among the people with whom he was mixing in the West when he's teaching. No time to think of anything else. No time to say prayers. Never time to wash themselves or bathe. It is duty. Bolt their food. Duty is on them. Go out and work. Duty is on them. You know, even now, I remember, I mean, I haven't seen it for a while, but I used to see, if I was out on the road in the morning, people driving to work and eating their breakfast while driving, right? Or even women will have the little mirror and they'll be putting on their makeup at the stoplight, and adjusting their makeup, getting ready for their work, and because duty is on them. They have to, they're going, bolting their food. Bolt their food. Duty is on them. Go out and work. Duty is on them. Come home and think of the work for the next day. Duty is on them. It is living a dog's life. Actually, I wonder why he says dog. I mean, it's a kind of a curse, I guess. Nowadays, it's different. Nowadays, dogs, at least dogs with owners in America, mostly live a really blessed, charmed life. They get so much love and food, and at least here in Hollywood, we see the dogs lead a real blessed life. They get so well treated. But think dog's life. Think in India, if you've been to India, and see, and probably like that, there were plenty of street dogs also in America, in New York in those days. Nowadays, there's dog shelters and dog pound and whatever. It's hard. It's terrible. The dogs are just scrounging for a little scrap of trash or food, somehow trying to manage, and going on having litter after litter, and then the puppies get crushed under the wheels of the carriages and everything. It's just brutal, especially for the dog lovers, American dog lovers, to go to India and see the poor Indian dogs on the street. So it is living a dog's life, and at last, dropping down in the street, they die in harness like a horse. This is duty as it is understood. So he's painting this picture of what ordinary people think of it as duty is just going on the treadmill, running the rat race, as it were, and dying there. We have nothing higher than this little material world. We may fill it with other things, but it is our duty to give all work unto God. So here he's shifting it again. He's making this pretty strong. It's almost like you have to read carefully to see how he's switch it. How he switches between the two. I'm putting a mark here. On the one hand, he's saying as the ordinary idea of duty is just slavery, just running after, chasing the dollar, running the rat race, etc. And then actually, what is our duty? Give all work to God. His is all the work and the duties. You are not responsible. The servant is not. Blessed are we that we are ordered out here. We serve our time. Whether we do it ill or well, who knows? If I do it well, I do not get the fruits. If I do it ill, neither do I care. Be at rest, be free, and work. So he's not saying don't work. He's not saying, but he's saying change our view of work. And changing, obviously, he's encouraging us to adjust our idea of what the duty means. Duty doesn't mean chasing the dollar. Duty doesn't mean anything else but offering all our work to the divine as a sacrifice, offering our whole life as a sacrifice to the divine. This is the only duty and nothing else. And any other duty binds us to the world and makes us suffer, scorches the innermost soul of all of us. So, and then he says, we're blessed. We're blessed to be here to work, to hold ourselves as a sacrifice. This is the tremendous blessing. This is where we get the nectar that's talked about in the Ashtavakra Samhita also, Ashtavakra Gita, this nectar of tranquility. If we hold ourselves as an eternal sacrifice unto the Lord, then that brings tremendous tranquility and peace. It's a nectar that flows into our hearts. But then he says, be at rest, be free, and work. Then next sentence, this is a very hard thing to attain. We know it is. Man means we are so tied down by this idea of duty. Men go out into the world and struggle and fight for money. Ask them why they do it. They say duty. It is the absurd greed for gold, and they want to cover it with a few flowers. What is duty after all? All duty is behind. It is this pulsation of the flesh, our attachment. And when an attachment has been established, we call it duty. Interesting. It's all attachment of the flesh, and when an attachment has been established, we call it duty. For instance, in countries where there is no marriage, there is no duty between husband and wife. When marriage comes and husband and wife live together, they live together on account of flesh attachment, and that becomes settled after generations. And when it becomes settled, it becomes a duty. It is a sort of chronic disease. Now, we may say this Swamiji, of course, being a monk, he looked on it as purely a flesh attachment. I think in other places he gives a much higher idea of and in fact in which talk is it? I think it's in this. I can't remember now in which class. It could be in Each is Great in His Own Place. He describes at length the duties of householders and the duties of monks, and how the duty of householders is and the relation between husband and wife, and that it's a relationship of mutual support in spiritual life ultimately. But here he's looking at the downside. It is a sort of chronic disease. When it is acute, we call it a disease. When it is chronic, we call it nature. So when attachment becomes chronic, we call it duty. Baptize it with a high-sounding name of duty. We strew flowers upon it. Trumpets sound and sacred texts are said over it, and it is called duty. And then the whole world fights, and each one robs the other for this duty's sake. It's actually tremendous and hilarious. Let me read that again. It's beautiful. It is a sort of chronic disease. When it is acute, we call it a disease. When it is chronic, we call it nature. So when attachment becomes chronic, we call it duty. Baptize it with the high-sounding name of duty. We strew flowers upon it, trumpets sound, and sacred texts are said over it, and it is called duty. And then the whole world fights, and each one robs the other for this duty's sake. Okay. It's so irreverent that it makes us smile, right? Duty, that now he acknowledges, duty is good. It checks brutality to a certain extent. The lowest people, the lowest human beings who cannot have any other ideal, it is something good for them. But for those that want to be karma yogis, they must throw this idea of duty overboard. There is no duty for you and me. Whatever you have to give to the world, give. It is not duty. So now he's really bringing it to this beautiful conclusion. Those who want to be karma yogi, so duty is for ordinary people. Yes, it's good to a certain extent, and gradually we purify it and raise it higher and higher. And even in his beginner's class for karma yogis, he says, yes, do your duty, do it in an unattached way, do it as well as you can, and don't long for the duty of another, do your own duty, and gradually purifying, and now he says those who really want to be karma yogis, because what is the goal of karma yoga? The goal of karma yoga is freedom, is mukti, is liberation, is God realization, as is the goal of all yoga. So those who really want to be karma yogis, then they must throw this idea of duty overboard. Let it go. At the beginning, duty. Then, throw it overboard. Whatever, and this is such a beautiful line here. Whatever you have to give to the world, give. Yes, we're here to give, but it is not duty. It is just give. Be not compelled. Why should you be compelled? Everything that you do under compulsion is an attachment. Why should you have any duty? You have no duty under the sun. Give up all duty unto the Lord. His is the duty. What is mine? In this tremendous fiery furnace where this fire of duty scorches everybody, drink this cup of nectar and be happy. This, another quote, sort of paraphrase from this text, the Ashtavakra Gita, Ashtavakra Samhita. Let me, from the first chapter. Verse number 8. And this verse states, Aham Karta, starts with this idea. Aham Karta means I am the doer. Aham Karta iti aham mana maha krishnadi dangshitaha. No, aham maha krishnadi dangshitaha. That means Maha, the great black serpent that is the biting us. And what is that biting? That great black serpent is this idea, I am the doer. I am the doer. So therefore, since I am the doer, I have duty also. I am the doer. This idea of I am the doer is the great black serpent of egoism, aham mana, this egoism, this sense that I am important, and this pride and conceit and all of that. That is like a great black serpent. So Swamiji calls it the fire of duty scorches everybody. Here he's saying it's like the serpent biting. But the second line is this nahang karta. I am not the doer. Nahang karta iti vishvasa, the faith that naham karta, I am not the doer. What is this? This is amritam, nectar. And amritam pitva sukhi bhava, drinking this nectar, the nectar of the faith that I am not the doer. Be happy. So this is quoting that in the second part of this. He says, in this tremendous fiery furnace where this fire of duty scorches everybody, drink this cup of nectar and be happy. This nectar that I am not the doer. Or, as Swamiji says, he gives the kind of ideas here, I am simply working out his will. I do not care for the good or the bad, for the reward or the punishment. I do not care for the reward or the punishment. And then he has a kind of curious line. If you want the apple, you must have the rod. And I'm not sure what it's referring to. Yeah, reward and punishment. If you want the reward, you must have the rod. If you want, no, he's if we want the apple, you must have the rod. The apple being a kind of reward. If you want the reward, you must have the punishment. Else, when the time comes, the only way to get out of the punishment is to give up the reward. The only way of getting out of misery is by giving up the idea of happiness, because they are linked to each other. On one side, happiness, and the other, misery. This is part of the dvandvas, the duality of our, which characterizes our existence in this world. In duality, we have happiness and misery. And we have to remind ourselves that happiness, as it is used here, doesn't mean that bliss which is our own true nature, that tranquility, that nectar of tranquility. It means the joy which comes from the attainment of our desires, fulfilling our desires. Because that kind of happiness is always followed by misery. They come in like the waves. The sea rises and it falls, and it rises and it falls, and we get this kind of happiness of fulfilling desires, and then we get a misery of another unfulfilled desire, or an unfulfilled desire, and go back and forth, back and forth. So the only way of getting out of misery is by giving up the idea of happiness, because they are linked to each other. On one side, happiness, and the other, misery. On one side, life, and on the other, death. The only way to get beyond death is to give up life. Do not care for it, because they are the same thing looked at from different points. So all such ideas as happiness without misery or life without death are very good for schoolboys and children, but you who have begun to see it as it is, say at once, nonsense. It is a contradiction in terms. Bold, he's continuing. This is the last class for advanced students, so he's giving the strong medicine here. Say at once, nonsense, life without death, happiness without misery. This idea that there will come a time when this world will be perfect, and we'll all be, the lion will lie down with the lamb, and everyone will be happy, and there will be no misery. It is a contradiction in terms, because it is in duality. So give up both the reward and the punishment. Do not seek for any praise or reward for anything you do. It is the hardest task to do. It is the hardest task to do. I've read about one that one spiritual practice to do is to do a small act of kindness or good or service for someone, making sure that nobody knows about it. That nobody finds out about it, and you don't tell anybody about it. The person for whom you did it doesn't know that you did it for them. Nobody knows about it, and you don't tell anyone about it afterwards. This is a kind of practice, because typically we want some recognition, right? And we do it even, of course, in our monastery where we always prepare the lunch. And typically people remember to offer some praise to the cook, right? That, oh, it was good, not bad, huh? Nicely done, nicely prepared. And the cook also, in a way, we expect that. We've worked hard to prepare a meal. And if we put it out and nobody says anything, we kind of feel like, well, did they like it? It may be a particularly a Western thing. I mean, in our monasteries in India, especially our head monastery in India, Belur Mutt, we all come in and we sit in long rows on the floor, and then the brothers themselves serve the food, the junior brothers, and it gets served. And we all chant our meal prayer, and then we all begin to eat, and a certain amount of talking is going on also. But the cooks, they're nowhere to be seen. They've finished their job cooking, and they're probably resting now, or maybe they're still cleaning the kitchen probably, and they'll eat afterwards. So we're not there. So there's no one to praise, actually. We're not praising the cook, and the monk who's in charge of the kitchen. It's possible that after the meal someone might say, hey, that was a particularly good dish, let's have more of that, or something like that, who knows. But I never saw that. But he's watching. He's watching, are the monks enjoying the food? Are they asking for more? That means they like it. So he's seeing a little bit, because he wants to serve his brothers by providing them with good food. He's not the cook exactly. He may cook one or two little things, but it's the cooks are actually hired employees of the monastery, cooking for hundreds, perhaps thousands of people a day, because monks themselves will be several hundred. And then there are also many workers, and we also have probably feeding over 1,000 guests, devotees, every day in the monastery. And that's on regular days, not on festival days where it becomes tens of thousands. So there's no sense of having eaten the meal. There's no sense of having to thank the cooks or the kitchen in charge, and the kitchen in charge also not expecting actually any praise. It's his duty to prepare. He's doing it ideally, and we hope, and I believe so, doing it as worship. He's serving the brothers as worship to prepare the meal, and so he's not expecting for any. But naturally, if he sees that the brothers are particularly enjoying a meal, he'll feel satisfied. But here Swamiji is cautioning us, do not seek for any praise or reward for anything you do. It is the hardest task to do. No sooner do I say a few good words to a person than I want to see it blazoned in all the papers of the world. No sooner do I give 5 cents to a beggar than I want my name carried down to posterity. Of course, 5 cents in those days was a little more than it is now. Probably it is equivalent to a couple of dollars, at least $2 or $3, I would think, maybe more. In those days, they still had half cents, half pennies. But so no sooner do I give 5 cents to a beggar than I want my name carried down to posterity, and misery must come as the result. Blazoned, and Swami Vivekananda did have his name blazoned in all the newspapers of the world. But most of us don't. That doesn't happen to most of us. The greatest people in the world have passed and were unknown. Nobody recognized them. The Buddhas and the Christs that you see are but second and third degree men in comparison with them. In several places he mentions this. This is quite an amazing assertion, that the great teachers of the world that we see that are known were not the highest ones. The highest ones, nobody noticed, nobody recognized, nobody saw them. They have lived in every country working silently. They depart, but at length appears a Buddha or a Jesus, and they become known to us. The highest men and women were not known to us. They passed away silently and left their ideas to the world. They did not seek to get any name or fame from their knowledge. They never made any claims, and so did not establish systems. I have seen one such who lives in a cave. Now we're going to tell a little bit about Pavhari Baba, the great saint of Ghazipur, who lived in a kind of cave that I think he may have dug out himself, and whom Swamiji greatly admired, as next to Sri Ramakrishna being the greatest yogi, the greatest saint he had ever seen. And he's even written a kind of biography of Pavhari Baba. A most wonderful man, the most wonderful man I ever saw. Whenever I ask him a question, he will never answer, but will say, "What does your servant know?" It is only in the course of conversation that some answer comes out, but he would never answer a direct question. He is one of the most wonderful creatures I have ever seen. The man in him is gone. If an animal bites him, he is ready to give the other arm to the animal and to say, "It is the Lord's will." The Lord has come in the shape of an animal. And in fact, it is said he was bitten once by a snake, and possibly a cobra, but perhaps it didn't inject venom, because after a few hours he was all right, or perhaps through yogic power, or who knows. But whatever it may be, he said, about it, he said, "A messenger has come from the beloved." If a dog or an ass comes, it is the Lord. Everything that comes is the Lord. He will not show himself to men, and yet he is a magazine of ideas. These ideas will go forth and enter the minds of some other mortals, and they will rise up and teach and establish them. These are the pure sattvikas who can never make any stir, but melt down in love. There was a burglar who was transformed by Pavhari Baba. There was, in fact, one of the disciples of Ramakrishna was in the Himalayan region and met a monk and was hearing about his life story. And the monk was telling a story about Pavhari Baba. He had heard, which was that in the middle of the night, a thief broke into his hut, Pavhari Baba's hut, and stole was stealing a few of the pots and pans that were in there. And at that point, Pavhari Baba woke up from the noise, and in fright, the thief jumped up and ran off. And Pavhari Baba picked up the pots and pans and ran after him and saying, "Oh Lord, here are your pots and pans, please take them." So this monk was telling this story of Pavhari Baba, and then he said, "I am that thief." So he was transformed by Pavhari Baba and became a monk, a sadhu. That's a very touching incident. So there's probably a good place to stop. I don't know if there are any questions among the yes, we have Lisa has something, and maybe Narayana has something.
It seems like he is saying that duty has different forms that, well, it seems to me that the word is being transformed through the gunas upward.
Okay, nice.
And I'm still feeling like Narayana has a point about connecting it to Dharma when it reaches the sattvic level, but it seems like it's being transformed because it seems to be at every point of life. You can see it as something that it's my duty, it's part of my selfishness, it's my identity, and then it becomes that tamasic thing of I expect to be rewarded for that versus making it an offering to God instead. I mean, am I somewhere in the zone of?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That we go from, as Swami Vivekananda has said many times, we don't go from error to truth, but from lower truth to higher truth. So the lower truth is we do our duties as best we can, those duties which come to us. We find our own calling in life, but gradually we move to a higher understanding where we transform our duty. It's no longer duty, it's simply an offering. We stand aside, we offer it, and we make our whole life, ultimately we turn our whole life into a sacrifice unto the divine. And if we want to be karma yogis, we have to go beyond the ordinary idea of duty as serving or as helping others. Because just a little bit further on, Swamiji will say, never think you are helping anyone. Who are you to help? You are simply do it as worship. Be grateful, bow down to the beggar and thank him that you are being granted an opportunity to do a little service to the divine. So that kind of idea.
There's an online question.
Okay.
Kimberly says, what about bodhisattvas, whose duty it is to help humanity reach their divinity?
Well, it's a question of semantics, really. Or is it the duty of a bodhisattva to help humanity to divinity? It's the vow of a bodhisattva not to enter nirvana. This is, of course, in Buddhism. Not to enter nirvana until all sentient beings attain nirvana. That I will enter the gate last, as it were. I remember I attended a Zen center for some time, and they would chant every day the Bodhisattva vow. And part of it went like this: sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. They would chant this vow that sentient beings are numberless, and still, so it's a kind of a paradox. It's an impossibility on the one hand, and yet this highest ideal. So actually, it's an ideal of utter selflessness. So I wouldn't call it a duty. Actually, I wouldn't call the bodhisattva as having a duty to help others attain enlightenment or God realization or enter nirvana. It's a vow. It's holding themselves, it's taking the ideal of unselfishness to the very highest level, that I will not enter final nirvana and final freedom until everyone gets there. Everyone is bound to get there, and everyone must get there, and I myself hold back until all attain there. And yes, at the same time, help, as it were, help. That's the question. Is that the right word? I'm not sure that's the right word. I vow to save them. With the vow, this vow to push everyone through the gates of nirvana and then to follow them.
Well, technically it means that you never will, because if sentient beings are numberless, then it's endless.
I couldn't hear you.
I said technically it means that you never will.
Technically it means you never will. Well,
The sentient beings are numberless.
the sentient beings are numberless. But nirvana is also infinite and beyond. Hard to know, isn't it? Hard to know. I'm not a scholar in Buddhism, so the ideas of bodhisattva. But we look at Swami Vivekananda. He has made some statements very much like bodhisattva. Like, I may find it good to get out of my body, but I shall not cease to work until humanity knows that it is one with God, that all human beings know that it is they're one with God.
No, but I feel like
Or I'm ready to give up 100 lifetimes to help one person, that kind of.
yeah, but like in his case, I feel like it's different because he's ever free.
He is already ever free. And yet there's a separate individuality,
No, that's what I'm saying.
a sage, and a sage of the, you can say, an ancient primordial celestial sage or something.
I feel like there's always that individuality because that's my question about Ishvara Kotis and Nitya-Siddhas, always. That like when people say like ever perfect soul, like there's still a trace of an individuality there has to be.
Right.
That makes sense.
There's a trace of individuality. Yes, well then now we're getting into naughty philosophical questions. But yes, if from the standpoint of today's class, the Bodhisattva doesn't have a duty, but has a vow, which is, I think, is a little different.
There's one more question. Swamiji, brahmacharya is necessary for spiritual progress?
Well, what do we mean by brahmacharya? This is not really in line with today's class, but brahmacharya is restraining and directing all our energies to the spiritual life. Brahmacharya is moving in Brahman. So very often it is translated as, particularly as celibacy. And obviously for monks, that is our calling. For householders, it is, we can call it chastity. That means exclusive dedication to one's own partner, and thereby restraining and directing that energy, and particularly the sexual energy, which is one of the strongest energies in our body-mind system, and directing it, channeling it to... it's a question of conservation of energy. But no, I do not believe it is necessary for spiritual progress. It is certainly necessary for monks, and I believe that it's typically a natural unfolding as one's spiritual life deepens, and it's something that should come naturally. If you enforce it, it creates disasters. Look at all the disasters in the news. You can't enforce celibacy. It has to be a natural calling, and an unfolding of a deep longing for spiritual progress, and a certain attainment of inner tranquility and peace and joy, and then it falls away of itself. That's the only way that it will help us. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Let's take just a moment of silence to reflect, and then we close with our chant. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritangamaya Aviravirma Idhi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace.